Hello, welcome back to part 3, which is the last and final phase of our CIMA revision strategy video step by step. Part 3 would be looking at continuation again from the SAPE framework, but this time we're focusing on why it is important to plan your answer, as well as actually what to take into account when you're actually executing the answer, which is what is commonly called the P, as well as the FISA framework. And then after, we're going to clarify to you what now, how do you take the revision process forward and get yourself ready for the November 2015 exam. So welcome to part 3. Thank you very much. Part of the SAPE is at some point you have to do a plan. Now some would say, do I have to write a plan at the front of my answer material or the back? It just says a plan. A plan can be a cognitive plan. It can be a documented plan. Have a plan. Nobody says you must write. Don't spend the whole time. Fine, you have to spend some time planning, but if you're going to spend the whole time planning, you end up not writing. Examiners won't give you marks for the plan. They give you marks for the actual answer. So a plan could be cognitive. It simply means spend some time, reflect on what is it you want to write. You've reflected on the indicative syllabus area. You have looked at the scenario. You have looked at the operative verb. You have looked at the marks required. You know that it actually needs 10 marks. It's a 10 marks question. They ask you to explain. You probably need to come up with about 5 different points. If it was a 10 marks question they ask you to discuss, you probably need about 3 or 4 key points to be able to get to this point. So you've looked at the marks allocated. You've looked at all this. Now you're saying, okay, my plan is to come up with 5 different points. Why? Because they're asking me to explain, and explanation is almost going to be 2 marks per point. So I need like 5 separate points to be able to get to my 10 marks. So have some plan in your head. You can't just start writing, no idea how many points you are trying to make and how does that relate to the exam verb. Have some plan. It could be bullet points that you develop. Now, but from what do you build these plans? These plans are built from the syllabus area. If you understand the syllabus area and you could connect it with the scenario, it becomes easy for you to actually develop a plan. So what one is calling for here is have some form of plan to be able to make sure that you stay on script. The plan should be aligned to the number of marks assigned for the question. We're going to see during our face-to-face tuition, on our revision programs across the campus, how you make sure that whatever you're developing with respect to the plan is in line with the number of marks which are assigned. And obviously, almost the last phase is talking about you have to execute that plan. You have to actually write out the plan. Now, we've tried to summarize here the common basic principles. It says PEA, or FISA. We always talk about this. It's something that sounds pretty intuitive, but it's often a challenge in terms of how to put that to actually answer a question. P simply means point, explain, apply. Point, explain, apply. Here's what this thing means. They've given you a scenario. There's an expectation that whatever comes to your mind, whatever theories you've learned that is relevant to the scenario, please apply that theory to the scenario. If you say that performance planning is one of the things I want to talk about, you're saying that because performance planning you have identified as one of the component areas in performance management. You must explain, give reasons why you are talking about performance planning. But apart from that, apply it to the scenario. If you're not giving reasons, but you are applying to the scenario is important, because otherwise, why did they give you the scenario? We often mark scripts, we've been marking scripts for 10 years. Sometimes you find a scenario has been given, you find a student given an answer, and the answer's got nothing to do with the scenario. You check the next point, the answer, it's got nothing. So you sometimes wonder, okay, why did we give this scenario? Because you've answered the question, you've made all these elaborate points, which are all theoretically sound, but not a single one have you tried to show how it relates to the scenario. It does not help the examiner. At best, you'll be getting half marks, if at best, half marks for theoretical points. Like I said, it's a professional exams. So this thing is saying, as you execute the answer, make sure that if you say I'm going to make 4 points, make sure that 4 solid points, each point, as far as possible, apply. If you cannot do it for all 4, at least the first 2. The examiner needs, they read the first 2 before it goes to the second 2. Let him get the feeling that from the first 2 you had made a very good attempt to apply. So if the other 2 points become very theoretical points, the examiner knows that not every single, we work with principle and model, it's not in every situation where every single principle and model will be applicable in the scenario. So the examiner can see that the elements which are applicable, you've applied them. So the other elements, you're just giving some knowledge. The examiner can work with that. So if one thing one is trying to make a point, explain the point, you have to apply the point. And please use distinct paragraphs. There is no such thing as one bullet paragraphs or one sentence paragraphs. For an Englishman, a paragraph is a combination of sentences that reinforce the same point. You can't come and be writing bullet. Okay, maybe we can forgive you if you're at operational level. If they ask you to describe or explain or to state things, maybe you can write bullet. Management level is a no-go, especially words like discuss, recommend, evaluate. You cannot do that with one sentence and expect to earn maximum marks. You need to make a point. You need to explain why you've made that point. Provide a sound theoretical basis for that point. If you say performance planning, explain what is performance planning. And then apply that, show how performance planning is actually relevant in that particular. So it's almost like, you almost need like 3 sentences, minimum. It could even be more. It depends on, if you talk about explain and describe, maybe it's 3 sentences. The higher you go, it's common to say the higher you go, the colder it becomes. If you're going to be doing discuss or you're going to be doing evaluate, recommend, 3 sentences will not cut it. Because you know why? For a description, it's probably 1 to 2 marks. For an evaluation, it's probably 3 to 4 marks. You're not going to get 4 marks by making 1 bullet point or 2 bullet points. So you need to go beyond actually applying the point. You're going to see actually on the course how we actually develop this to actually make sure that the P is actually integrated. The other thing that it's important that learners actually do understand is what is commonly called FISA. FISA, check this out. Facts, inferences, speculation, assumption. What exactly does this mean? The examiner, facts is what has been given to you in black and white. ABC is a small company located blah 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 blah. Whether you agree with it or not, you don't agree, it's something else. But these are the facts. That's what the examiner has given you to work with. It's in black and white, those are the facts. Okay. Now, inferences are conclusions that you can draw from the facts. In most cases, the answers you provide to the examiner, they are made from inferences, not from facts. Because they give you facts so you can analyze the facts to see whether you can come up with some conclusions which are rational. The quality of a good inference is that any 2 rational persons looking at the same set of facts should agree with the same inference. For instance, I was commonly sometimes make this. I could say A is a company has got a market share of 30%. B is a company has got a market share of 40%. Those are the facts I've given you. You can then draw your inference that B was doing better than A, at least with respect to market share. Any other person looking at these facts, understand what is market share, would agree with you. That's almost what is called an inference. 2 rational persons would agree that this inference is right. Now, there's also what is called S. S stands for speculation. Sometimes the same set of facts can give rise to 2 plausible interpretations. In other words, it is not conclusive that only one inference can be drawn from the facts. A couple of inferences can be drawn, so to speak, inferences in quote. That's almost like when you've entered a zone of speculation. Now, after speculation, A stands for assumptions. Assumption is almost like there are no facts. You've just made your own stuff. For instance, you've been asked to calculate the net present value. I've given you data that you could have derived the cost of capital, but because you don't know how to derive the cost of capital, you say assuming that the cost of capital is 10, but it's actually not 10. But you've just made it. So it's your own thing that you make up. Now, if you look at the point one wants to make here is, facts you'll be given. You are responsible for inferences, you are responsible for speculation, you're responsible for assumptions. To solve any problem, inferences have to be drawn. Speculation, sometimes the world is not perfect. Sometimes the information is deliberately kept out of the scenario to see how you would draw inferences. And if you calculate something, if I add these 2, I say combined, these 2 companies combined had a market share of 70%. And then I'm trying to draw a conclusion. These 2 companies combined was dominating the industry. This 70% is an inference. If you calculate, you've just taken the 2 facts, put them together, you got to a number, it's an inference. Now, and you're saying based on this, they were dominating. It's also a further inference you are drawing from a primary inference you've made. So the examiner expects that you should take facts and process in some shape or function. But remember, as you move this side, facts have a higher quality in terms of predicting, in terms of showing the relevance to your decision making. Inferences, they're good quality, but not as good as facts. Speculation is also good, but not as good as inferences. Assumption good, but not as good as speculation. So what that means is, as you move towards this side, the quality of your answer, the credibility of your answer is getting weaker and weaker and weaker. So primarily, we love answers that are based on facts primarily. if not based on facts, we will not mind. We'll be very happy with answers that are based on, in fact, majority of answers will be based on inferences. Now, can you therefore make assumptions? Of course you can make assumptions, but just make sure that there were no facts, there were no inferences, there were no speculations that could have prevented the need for that assumption. Because assumption is almost like setting your own question. Sometimes it's argued, it means like every other answer is right, depends on how you argue it. It is not the case. Yes, in advanced level, at advanced level, certainly it depends on how you answer the case. But the way you answer the case, my motto is, as the examiner, have you used the facts? Have you used the inferences? Have you avoided drawing in assumptions where there were facts or inferences speculated or prevented? You go like this is FISA, you go like this as if. You are expected to read, to apply your own. So as you try to do your P and execute your answer, make sure that, especially when you're doing your A, make sure that the applications you're doing the scenario, they're based on facts. They're based on inferences that you've drawn from the facts. Don't inject your own facts. If they say ABC is a small company, give examples that is relevant to a small company and relevant to that ABC. Don't bring an example from a large company where you work. That's now you're not entering into assumptions and speculations and all the rest. You only enter there if there are no facts. After all, it's a small company. So work within the confines of a small company. It's almost like putting you in a box. You need to work within that box. You sometimes argue that, well, we need to learn to work out of the box. Of course you have to learn, but you have to first operate within the box. Because the box is the confines, is the boundaries of the case study which has been given to you to work with. We want to know whether you can apply that to that particular company. It doesn't help me if you can show all the other companies where you can apply it to, but you have not shown the one. So yeah, you can get out of the box, but first serve and operate within the box. That's why this FISA is actually important. You're going to see on the course, as we do case studies, 25 marks types question, 15 10 marks question, how we actually put this together to actually make sure that whatever we're doing is in line with the facts, is in line with the inferences, and being linked up appropriately. All right, now that gives you almost some form of rundown about what our SAPE framework, which is the bedrock or the basis on which we roll out and demonstrate how exam questions have to be dealt with. So what now? We have, just like I mentioned from the beginning, we have sent out the e-release materials that you need to be going through. Like I said, we've given you a self-assessment test that you can practice on. Try and apply this, sit at home, do it, try and time yourself. You have not yet received the solutions. It's not by error. We deliberately withheld the solutions because we want you to attempt it by yourself and you come back to campus so that we can start showing you how these general principles in terms of ASAPE can be applied. It's something that you need to learn, you need to hone, practice that over and over, and then it will significantly improve how you deal with exam questions. Now, so this is what we're calling on you for this session that is coming through for November 2015. You need to go through this, practice on it before the revisions effectively start. Even if you don't get the chance to do it, we strongly recommend you do so before you come for revision class. Practice the test that we've already asked within the time frame allocated before you come to class. If you haven't done so, as soon as we finish with the first session of the class, please go back and make sure you practice this, because this is, at the beginning, it's going to sound like it's a very cumbersome process. You're always tempted to go back and do shortcuts. Those shortcuts is what is going to eventually probably get you to answer your questions wrongly. Keep in mind, it's an exam that requires practice. Practice. Doesn't matter how much you know in an area. If you've never practiced in that area and looked at how exam questions are applied in that area, you see it for the first time in the exam, you will not do well. So you want to make sure that you apply that in every single case. Now, the question often gets asked. The information is, so we know that you're all studying, you're all working, and you're studying. You got multiple commitments. On average, you need almost like 300 hours per semester.